Hey buddy, Crow back again, and I'm doing another video response to Novabug's monthly Friday Foursome series. This time it's just on gaming surprises, a very general topic. Could be about anything that surprises you in gaming, I guess. It has to be gaming related. It could be something in a game or something about a game or just, I guess, concerning you and a game. Very general topic. I've been doing the Friday Foursomes every month now since he started it up this year again. And I do like doing these types of video responses, so I'm going to keep doing them as long as I'm able to. For gaming surprises, for my first one, I'm going to go with basically the day that I guess my family got an NES. Because it was something that came out of nowhere. Of course, I had a lot of friends that had an NES, and I mean, it was like a year or two after the NES was released, so I've had a chance to go over to other people's houses and play the games and stuff, and I was like, I always wanted one, but I knew, with the way my parents were, we weren't gonna just go out and buy an NES, because the response was always, well, don't you already have a video game system? You've got the Atari 2600, you have a computer, you have the Commodore 64, but I just really wanted to play those NES games. Now this is gonna go a little bit off topic, but my grandparents at the time were retired, and they would spend the summers in Upper Michigan in a cabin that my grandfather built. And they spent the winters in Las Vegas. They had a condo in Las Vegas, small condo, and they would kind of drive back and forth. And the middle point is where all of our family lived, pretty much, almost all the family lived in the Chicagoland area. So they were visiting the one day, and they were saying, hey, we're going to be leaving. And I was like, hey, take me with you. I'm out of school for the summer. Take me. And they were like, okay, fine, go. So I drove up with my grandparents to the cabin, and I spent like 2 weeks up there. And then they kind of basically were like, well, you need to go back. And they were like, well, how are we going to get you back? And they basically put me on a Greyhound bus back to the Chicago area. And then my mom picked me up, and then I walked in the door. I remember this. I so vividly. I walked in the door, walked into the living room. As I'm walking in there, my little sister is playing the NES on the floor, and I'm looking, and I'm walking, just like looking at the floor, like I see it, but I don't believe it. And then I was like, do we have an NES? And they were like, yes. So I think I spent the whole rest of the day just playing that thing. I don't even think I unpacked from the trip. What was I, like 9 or 10 years old at the time? I somewhere around there. And I'll never forget those like first batch of games we had. We had, of course, the original Super Mario Brothers, Friday the 13th, Jaws. You could say those are terrible games, but they have a special place for me because those were the first NES games we had. It turns out, while I was gone, they had gone to a flea market, and they wound up buying the NES and a bunch of games at the flea market. I don't even think they had boxes or anything. All right, my second surprise for this Friday Foursome had to happen somewhere around the mid-90s. It was over at my mom's house, and my sister, who still lived there at the time, had a Game Boy, and she had left it out. And I looked at it, and I was like, what game is in there? It was Donkey Kong. I haven't played Donkey Kong in a long time. So I turned it on, and I start playing Donkey Kong. You get to the first 4 levels, and I expected it to repeat. But then it didn't. It turned out to be a whole different game. So basically, my surprise was Donkey Kong on the Game Boy not being a port of Donkey Kong, the arcade. And that may have surprised a lot of people. I don't know who actually bought that game knowing that it was a completely different game. But I didn't know anything about it. I saw the cartridge, it just said Donkey Kong. So I started playing it. When I get to the end, I expect it to repeat, just like I'm repeating the story. And and it just blew me away. I was like, what the hell is this? And I just kept wanting to keep playing, even though I kind of had to stop because I had other things to do. Now, my third gaming surprise is actually very similar to something Novabug had on his list, but it's something I've got to put on mine anyway, and that's pretty much the PlayStation 1. Now, up until the release of the PlayStation 1, or as we called it back then, the Sony PlayStation, I was actually going into the military in 1995. The PlayStation released in the fall of 95, but I was going into boot camp for the Air Force in July, late July of 95. So I really wasn't even looking at video games or anything. I was just kind of focusing on what I needed to do to get into boot camp and start my my tenure in the military, as it were. So I went to military boot camp, and by the time I was done with boot camp, I got put into technical school. And my technical school lasted about 9 months in the Air Force. But it was around exactly the same time in September that I got out of boot camp that the PlayStation was released. And I remember walking around the dorm area of the on base of where I was staying at the time during tech school, of course, and people were just gathered in somebody's room, and I just kind of wandered in there, and they were playing the PlayStation, something I hadn't really been following at all. And I walked in there, and they were playing Battle Arena to Shinden, and it blew me away. Now, keep in mind, I'd seen games on the 3DO and the Jaguar. Those were the last things I kind of seen. But this kind of 3D on the PlayStation was just fast and fluid. Things played like an arcade game, which really hadn't been seen on the 3DO in that kind of polygonal style or whatever. So I knew right then and there I had to get a PlayStation. Now, oddly enough, when I did buy my PlayStation like a month or two later, when I had actually saved up the money, and I still paid $300 for it, I didn't buy Battle Arena to Shinden. Instead, another game kind of leapt out at me. So when I bought my PlayStation, I bought Wipeout with it, and that game blew me away even more. Now, that was pretty much the biggest generational leap I had ever seen. And to this date, it still blows me away how just a little while ago I was playing Super Nintendo games, and then all of a sudden I'm playing something like Wipeout. It was mind-blowing. So for my fourth and final entry in this Friday Foursome regarding gaming surprises, it's been right on camera the whole time, and I'm kind of cheat a little bit. You're going to get 4 for 4 on this Friday Foursome from me, and that is these 4 pinball machines I have behind me. Every time I come down here and I look, I'm surprised that I managed to get these pinball machines, because like a lot of people, I don't just have a lot of cash laying around. I just can't go out and say, I'm gonna spend $6,000 on a pinball machine if I want to tomorrow. I can't do that. But around 2012, I had decided I had collected so much video game stuff. Wouldn't it be nice to sell a lot of that and see if I could get some pinball machines? My wife agreed to that, and I spent like a year and a half selling video games, and all that money was most of that money went dedicated towards pinball machines. Some of it went towards things like my LASIK eye surgery and whatnot. But each one of these kind of has a story. So I'm going to grab my phone, and the video and audio quality is probably going to change quite a bit. But I really have to go over each one of these one at a time, because really I'm surprised at each one of these. All right, so now we're on phone cam, and the first one is the first one I got here was the Time Machine. So this one kind of blew me away a lot, because this was the first pinball machine I did wind up getting. This one actually, I had started like perusing Craigslist and stuff on pinball machines that may be in the area, and this one showed up as in an advertisement for a garage sale. And my wife, who happened to be off that Friday, showed up like before it opened, and the guy was like, okay, sold it to her right away. So like I was like, oh my God, I got a pinball machine. How much do we pay for it? I think they were asking $400 for this, and my wife talked them down to $300. It did have a couple problems, but I've since fixed them. Of course, most of these require fixing at one time or another. But I got a couple of my friends. I rented a U-Haul truck the next day, picked it up, had to take this thing apart to get it out of their house, had to put it together. But man, it blew me away when I finally had a pinball machine. And then the second one I'm going to talk about here is the Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man. It just, my wife's a big fan of Pac-Man. So it kind of blew my mind that we were able to get a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man here. It turned out somebody she worked with, their parents had this in their basement and they weren't using it anymore. And just, these kind of coincidences are the kind of things that surprise me. So the coincidences that led up to me being able to get this, and this time I didn't have to rent a truck. My wife's sister was in town. We got to borrow her SUV at the time because I had a sedan at the time. There was no way this was fitting in my car. So, yeah, I mean, this does not play like the greatest pinball machine in the world, but just the fact that it is Pac-Man related makes this awesome. How much? We paid like $200 for this. It required, again, some work to get working again. Let's move on to the Hyperball. You can argue that this is not a pinball machine, but it kind of looks like one. No flippers though, but this has got a cannon that fires. You might be able to hear this thing because it is always loud because it's always got fans running, but basically you shoot at the targets. This was designed by one of my favorite pinball designers, Steve Ritchie, and I actually have his signature on it. This was advertised on Craigslist for like $300, and when we got there, the guy was like, I'll give it to you for like $200 because certain things weren't working on it. And I managed to trace out the problems, fixed it up. Still has a couple other things that I could do to make this a little bit better. I just never did it. But yeah, this is kind of a rare machine to have too, because a lot of times these would break pretty frequently. And instead of fixing them, operators would pretty much toss them. Would I sell any one of these? Sure, for the right price. Of course I would. But still, just amazed that I got one of these too. Just, the circumstances that lead up to getting one of these. And then I saved, of course, the best for last. My Stern Star Trek, and now I've got a lot of mods on this thing. But, oh man, I remember this being at the Pinball Expo. The first year that in 2013, that Stern was showing this off. I waited in line and I played it. And I was like, I love this machine. Like after one or two plays, I was like, I want this machine. I was like, if I could buy a machine right now, this would be the one I would buy. But of course, they don't sell these machines at the Stern booth. So literally, like half an hour later, we're walking around and I'm looking and I see a box, Stern box, Star Trek Pro. And I'm like, is that at one of the booths? And I'm like, to the guy, are you selling this? He was like, yeah. It's like, I'm like, how much are you asking for? It was like just shy of $5,000, if I'm remembering correctly. I was like, well, shoot, I don't have $5,000 in the bank account. Then I was like, wait a minute, I'm walking around with like $1,000 in my pocket at the time. Because I was really prepared. This is a year and a half after I started selling off stuff. I was like, hey, if I take that $1,000, I can afford this. And it just was a shock to me that I could spend almost $5,000 on a pinball machine at an expo. Because really, I don't really have money like that laying around. But, it was a plan, and it worked out even though I wasn't expecting it to. And to date, this is still my favorite pinball machine. So yeah, 4 surprises for number 4. But you could just group them all up as pinball surprises if you want. What's really funny is after we bought this, I was like, yeah, I'll come by tomorrow to pick it up. And then I was like, about half an hour later, I was like, I can't wait. I cannot wait to take this home. So I called, my wife called her mom, and she got in contact with her friend who had a minivan that said we could borrow anytime we wanted to. I was like, well, can we borrow it tonight? She was like, sure. So we showed up like late, like 10 o'clock at night. And they're like, here's the keys. It's like, you know, don't worry about filling up gas or anything. Bring it back whenever you want. We drove back to the Pinball Expo. It's like a 45 minute drive. Loaded it up, drove it back, unloaded it, and then I put the minivan back. And now it's like midnight. And I'm like, I can't wait. I gotta unbox this thing. And I made a video. I'm gonna link to the video somewhere of me unboxing this thing. And it's like 1 a.m. My wife's asleep on the couch and I'm unboxing this. I could not wait. And now what drove me crazy was like 3 o'clock. I was so tired. I had to go to sleep, but I had to go to the Pinball Expo again because they were doing signings. And that's where I got the Hyperball signed by Steve Ritchie. And I also have the Star Trek signed by Steve Ritchie. So one of my favorite pinball designers signed 2 of my machines. You know, I could go on forever, and I probably already went on longer than I should. So there you go. It's my Friday Foursome or Friday Sevensome if you want to separate these out. But I just had to. I had to. And if you want to do a video response or a response, check out Novabug's original video, Friday Foursome video on gaming surprises. I highly encourage you guys to do a response or at least comment on his video. Encourage the Friday Foursome to keep going. I'll catch you all next time.